With no exaggeration, I have tried to make this video 4 separate times over the last year, but I always gave up before I wrote a single word into the script. Why is that? Revisiting this manga, the way it makes me feel, the way the anxiety wells up in me from page to page, the topics it covers, the art, I don't mean to be melodramatic, but truthfully, I think it ruined my childhood. But let's back up and give some better context. What does a 13-year-old boy curious about girls do when he's not tired after being put to bed early by his parents? Well, look at manga, obviously. I knew firsthand from the 2 manga that I had read that even in series with little detail given to romance, there seemed to be a lot more to absorb there. The only problem was, I was paranoid. What if my parents were monitoring my activity? What if they could see what I did on my computer or on my phone? What if they had some sort of elusive parent tracking device? After all, one of the other benefits of manga that I'd seen at that point was the superior art and more lax standards for those so desired romance scenes that a boy my age would have wanted to see. Well, I thought that I'd found a loophole, although in all actuality, the threat probably didn't exist in the first place. I decided I'd get away from my parents' prying eyes by looking at manga on my 3DS. Being as quiet as possible, and either going under covers or blocking the light from under the door with a blanket, I started to read just a little bit each night, right up until the point where I got tired and my eyes hurt. Every night I would read a little bit more manga on my 3DS. It didn't seem so bad at first either. The first manga I read to completion was this super wholesome, ecchi harem romance Ichigo 100%, where by the end of the series, I remember my biggest problem being how I thought that they were all just so nice, and I felt bad that some of them wouldn't be able to get what they want. My second one was this. Unlike Ichigo, where I was rewarded with cute ecchi moments, nice blush scenes, cute dates, and almost all of these things, when they were presented in a way that made me uncomfortable. This manga was far more crude and angular. It felt more oppressive, but since the protagonist seemed similar to the past ones that I had seen, I kept rooting for him and waiting for the relationship to develop into some sort of healthy thing. It didn't. Sundome, or Sundome as the kid me called it, and for nostalgia's sake I'll be calling it in this video, I learned only recently is actually a Japanese slang word that basically means to stop right before, and is a romance story all about denial. Large acts of service, gross rewards, feeling dirty about yourself. At least that's how I felt when I was reading it as a kid, and how I still felt revisiting it now. As I've aged and experienced far more manga, it reminds me the most of something like The Flowers of Evil. But I honestly find Sundome to be the far more disturbing series. The Flowers of Evil famously has a very toxic relationship with broad artsy displays of ero and violence. To me, it felt largely over the top and exaggerated, which killed some of the realism that would have made those very situations discomforting. It felt, to me, more like a gross made-up world with gross unlikable characters and a muddy message that I didn't quite agree with. And next to Sundome, it didn't feel like it was trying to push anything. Like it was trying too hard to make me unnerved. And as I'll go into in a minute, I think that that's partially how it was able to grab on and affect me so deeply. Although, to be fair, I only got around 7 volumes into The Flowers of Evil, and I just determined it wasn't for me. So I'm not saying that series is bad, but it's not like Sundome is for me either. Because although the younger me still anxiously clicked through it, you see, the way that Sundome sucked the younger me in was in its presentation. Most of the time, it doesn't look like a horror manga. Instead, it opts a lot of the time for this typical gag and romance type of mood, which made me remember my happy times with Ichigo 100%. That only became more disorienting with the extremely uncomfortable situations the characters get in, and how you're considering these extremely comfortable things actively going on in the background underneath the lighter moments. Things that grossed me out or physically caused my body to cringe. I didn't find it appealing at all, but it gave a tone like any romance that I'd already seen. And because of this, my imaginative brain started to see other romance series with this darker view, that in the friend group in a typical romance, there could secretly be two characters up to this sort of thing, and we just wouldn't know because they're not the main characters. It also colored the view I had of romance in real life very negatively, considering I was a young boy with few actual experiences. It rarely depicts violent or verbal types of abuse, things that stories like this generally love to revel in, but is instead almost purely psychological. The silent treatment he gets from her when he doesn't perfectly do what she says, the anxiety and overthinking of him trying to fix or make her happy when she hasn't even given him enough information for him to positively know if she's even upset, how she admits to him that she tries to say and do things intentionally to put him in discomfort, to see his reactions, and to see the worst things that he'll do for her, all while reaffirming the power difference between them. This set me to overthink everything girls told me through middle school. I wasn't aware of how indirect people could be before this point. I mean, sure, I understood sarcasm, but I never knew the depth of implications that a conversation could hold. And so while overall, what I'm going to continue to talk about, I think, hurt me for the worse for a few years, this is maybe the primary silver lining that I could say I gained from this. To pay more attention to what people mean and imply, rather than what they say. Things like sarcasm, sure, but more the ways that people play this social game of back and forth, and how it can be very complicated, and some people make themselves very difficult to read. I feel like I'm super good at reading people right now, and I'm not sure how much of that contributes to reading the series. I doubt very much, but it's still a silver lining I like to see. But at the time, it just made me overthink everything I heard. All of the possibilities, the different ways people use words to imply small things. So it is bittersweet. But I guess it's time to get back into the bitter, so moving on. The chapters in Sundome are called collars, and the motif of a collar with a chain is repeated constantly to drive home the theme of control and denial. It is definitely supposed to be something spicy for some people with more specific tastes, but 13-year-old uninformed me understood none of that. Instead, I wondered if toxic things like this could really happen to people, or maybe even me, and that made me scared. I remember going to school afraid that some cute girl in my class could secretly be into this sort of thing, which admittedly is kind of funny to think of in retrospect now. But at the time, it was a genuine problem. For a bit after reading the story, I had a hard time kicking that thought from the back of my head, even when I didn't want to be thinking it. Like I didn't have full control over my thoughts. It made me scared to pursue relationships, scared to push beyond just hand-holding. The sense of control I'm sure some would be excited by made the younger me reading it feel constantly oppressed and absorbed in the world. It felt like there was no escape from the intensity of it. For example, the side plots and characters were also an extremely limited cast that always seemed to just barely tie in or be uncomfortably close to the main plot. So there was really no cutaway gags even when they attempted these lighthearted moments. There was always that deep, seedy undertone. That being said, to back off a bit, it would be unfair for me to say that it's actually a bad series. I honestly don't think that I can look at it in a level way to make up what I think is generally speaking an object look at it, but this one dude on AniList seems to think that it's pretty great, so it's possible that I just have too many things that freak me out and remind me of past childhood paranoia. Upon rereading some of it, I realized toward the end that yes, the relationship seems to somewhat become more equal, although she still has strong control over him, and ends with a sort of growth from the MC, although it's still very confusing and explicit. Speaking of the ending, it ends more bittersweet than some romance that I've seen, and it does definitively end without dragging its feet too long. It's only 8 volumes from start to finish, so it's not padded with a bunch of dumb filler and misunderstandings. Still, I remember for years to come, in relationships, I would always worry about what sort of strange things I may have to deal with if I talked to the wrong person, if I picked the wrong partner. Sure, I think that I would leave if I entered a toxic situation or relationship, but if it's that easy, then why didn't the MC change or leave? Now, that's how the younger me would get anxiety thinking of the series. That something or someone would be able to trap me, and I would change for the worse, become disgusting, less confident. I'd lose some of my freedom, my self-control, my general standards for morality. Nowadays, I would say it's because the MC and the girl were actually pretty similar to one another, and it states as much near the end of the series. And that he was never truly trapped, but had some part of the situation that he enjoyed all along. Just like plenty of other people who probably would enjoy this series a bit more than the younger me who first experienced it. But even with this hopefully reasonable observation thought through, it doesn't feel right in my heart, so I could never recommend it to someone. It feels like one of the doujinshis made to make you feel awful, but instead of lasting 20 or 40 pages, instead of maybe rarely hitting the 100 or 200 page mark, this is a full 8 volumes, and it isn't primarily made with a constant sense of rousing the reader. It stops right before, as the name suggests. Right before gratification would begin, and the story, as with the ending, cuts forward in time right before you can see a sense of concrete, satisfying resolution. It always leaves you on edge. That anxiety of a song stopping mid-phrase with a painfully extended singular note making you anxious, as though that when the note stops, will it stop abruptly, or will another loud noise play? And what could come or not come after was always the thing that scared me. I'm sorry for the amount of blurring in this video, but that's just the nature of this content on YouTube. If you do want a crisp, clear version of the video though, please pledge to my Patreon as I will be posting the video tomorrow here. I respond to almost all of my comments, and my last video wasn't even sent to some people's subscription feed, so I'm praying for any likes, comments, engagements to hopefully get my channel back on track here. Please help, and I'll try to respond to any and everyone in the comments below. And also, if there's any reason that you would want to read this manga, which I don't recommend, by the way, the manga is available in officially super high quality on Bookwalker for some reason. I don't get paid to promote this, but if you sign up and use my coupon code HIDING, I do get some kickback from that. And I love the idea of years later being able to get something positive out of this manga that ruined my early teens. Finally, thanks to all the new recent patrons and all of my Twitch supporters, specifically Friendly Neighbor, Wisbing2093, Daniel Frousing, VCTF, Jared Sumners, and My Name is Klein. I hope you all love the huge influx of regularly high-edited content, and I hope to keep that up until next time. So, take care of yourself. See ya.